Well, I just did one about robots and how far it goes back. In fact, during that one, I kind of made a mention of a few other places and connections to robots, or they did in the story that's there, and I added on. In fact, I want to add on even more. It's funny how whenever I do one like that, you can tell Big Brother's watching you because as soon as I jump on one of my research sites, it's the first thing to pop up, and I'm like, really? Anyhow, this is Ashoka that's right here, and he's at the shrine of Buddha, and they're about to divvy out the wealth of Buddha and all of his trappings. Quite often thought, and other people have said it too, that the little discs that are shown across the top of that shrine right there look very much like the sculling stones that they use in the Winter Olympics whenever they scoot the little thing along the ground and they use their brooms and try to paddle them, and they're playing this game with a circle on where they're going to end up that they used to do on ice. Made out of a certain kind of stone too. We're about to get into another one about Ashoka here and the Nine, but that's for another video. But here's another connective, one of those strings that we talk about. Notice they're wearing gathered pants. The reason that it took a little while for Ashoka to get a hold of Buddha's treasures and pass them out like we're supposed to have been is because robots guarded Buddha's relics in a legend in ancient India. As early as Homer, more than 2,500 years ago, Greek mythology explored the idea of automatons and self-moving devices. By the 3rd century BC, engineers in Hellenistic Alexandria in Egypt were building real mechanical robots and machines that they called biotechne, which we think of today as biotech. And such science fictions and historical technologies were not unique to Greco-Roman culture, or even in Egypt here at Alexandria, if you will. In my recent book, Gods and Robots, I explained that many ancient societies imagined and constructed automatons. Chinese chronicles tell of emperors fooled by realistic androids and describe artificial servants crafted in the 2nd century by the female inventor Huan Yang. It's a weird story that goes along with that too. She had these little dancing people, and it was up on a table, but controlled by mechanics all down under it, of course, and a clockwork type mechanism. And one of them went over and bowed to his wife, and then winked at her, and he got pissed. And he was like, and he was gonna cut his head off or whatever. And he's like, no, 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 look. And he gave away the magic trick right there and showing, oh no, look, this is this, and look in there and all these cogwheels and things are spinning around. Still, one wonders, so why'd you have it come over and then, well, it was to ask her to dance and so on. It was in a respectful way. I don't know. It's a strange thing, though. Techno marvels such as flying war chariots and animated beings also appear in Hindu epics. One of the most intriguing stories from India tells how robots once guarded Buddha's relics. As fanciful as it might sound to modern ears, this tale has strong basis and links between ancient Greece and ancient India. The story is set in a time of King Ajatasattu. I'm sure I botched that. And Ashoka. Ajatasattu was reigned from 492 to 460 BC, was recognized for commissioning new military inventions such as powerful catapults and a mechanized war chariot with whirling blades. When Buddha died, Ajatasattu was entrusted with defending his precious remains. The king hid them in an underground chamber near his capital, Pataliputra, now Patna, in northeastern India. Now, this mechanized war chariot, of course, reminds one of the Michelangelo type drawings where he had these cogs hooked up to the wheels in a way that whenever the wheels were going forward, it was putting blades out the side of it. But these warrior type creatures that are out here with these whirling blades that are protecting Buddha's relics remind one of perhaps in the Bible when they're kicked out of the Garden of Eden and then they can't get back in because there are angels there with this whirling blade you can't get past. So here's a picture of them divvying out the relics. Now the little things on top maybe look more like bread or something, or almost like grenades, but I won't go there with it. Large jar of soma out front, I'm sure. Traditionally, statues of giant warriors stood on guard near treasures, but in the legend, Ajatasatru's guards were extraordinary. They were robots. In India, automatons or mechanical beings that could not move on their own were called Bhuta Vana Yatanta, or spirit movement machines, in Pali and Sanskrit language, which we've talked about origins of Sanskrit language. According to the story, it was foretold that Ajatasatru's robots would remain on duty until a future king would distribute Buddha's relics throughout the realm. Well, ancient robots and automatons. Hindu and Buddhist texts describe the automaton warriors whirling like the wind, slashing intruders with swords, recalling Ajatasatru's war chariots with spinning blades. In some versions, the robots were driven by a water wheel or made by Vishwakarma, the Hindu engineer god, much like Hephaestus that we talked about in the other video. But the most striking version came by a tangled route to the Lokopanadi of Burma, Pali translations of older lost Sanskrit texts only known from Chinese translations, each drawing on earlier oral traditions. So even though they're written down in the first AD down to the 200, 300 BC, they are remnants left of texts that come from much earlier days. And we know about the ancient tales of the Mahabharata and such on like that. But here we see a picture of this goddish type person here, and in this he's wearing a Phrygian hat and he's been splattered with the dyes that they use traditionally now, which mainly contain red ochre, by the way, and cinnabar, same type of thing, and sometimes yellow ochre, which you can see here too. In his far right hand, he's apparently got something like a torch. In his left hand, it looks like hands clasping hands. In his bottom left hand, looks like he's got a cell phone. And in his right hand, a small lantern or lighting device. Sitting in that Buddha type pose, a long beard. And of course, we talked about Gautama Buddha and where that originally comes from, and the Tarim Basin people and stuff. Strangely, now that we're talking about this, that doesn't look like he's trying to be a real duck right there. It looks like some kind of little statue, and in fact, even though they're trying to make him somewhat realistic, that's supposed to be a fake duck thing, and they make it to look so. In this tale, many Yantakara, or robot makers, lived in the western lands of the Yavanas. That's Greek speakers. In Roman Visaya, the Indian name for the Greco-Roman culture of the Mediterranean world. Way back when. Yeah, so they got a bunch of robots over there, it says. And the Yavanas' secret technology of robots were closely guarded, though. Yeah, they wouldn't give it up. In fact, the robots of Roma Visaya carried out trade and farming and captured and executed criminals. Yeah. Robot makers were forbidden to leave or reveal their secrets. If they did, robotic assassins pursued and killed them. Yep, they've got this written down to this day. It says, rumors of the fabulous robots reached into India, inspiring a young artisan of Pataliputra and Ajatasatru's capital who wished to learn how to make automatons or robots. In the legend, the young man of Pataliputra finds himself reincarnated in the heart of Roma Visaya. He actually goes there to study and so on. He ends up marrying the daughter of a master robot maker and learns of his craft. One day he's going to steal the plans and take it back to India for making robots, and hatches a plot to get them back to India. certain of being slain by killer robots before he could make the trip himself. In one story, he slits open his thigh, inserts the drawings under his skin, and sews himself back up. In another idea, people have taken the idea from sewing tattoos and the way that that's done and said that he had tattooed it on his skin, and that whenever he died, his body came back with with it written on it, like the ancient treasure maps and stuff people talk about. Yeah, but it had a way to do it in some way. Then there's another idea with a slitting open in whatever it is, and that because he was in Egypt, Alexandria type thing, that perhaps they mummified him and inside of him inserted a scroll that contained this knowledge, and whenever he was taken back home, this knowledge was given there. But it said that it was given to his son somehow beforehand, that he had this knowledge, so he was to be on the lookout for it. Because he then tells his son to make sure his body makes it back to Pataliputa and starts the journey. But he's caught and killed, but his son recovers the body and brings it to Pataliputa. So, yeah, the robots got him, huh? Isn't that strange? Oh, I'm sorry. Has this been off just a little bit the whole time? Jeez. Well, that's so little you can't even read it. Now I'm just going wiggy wiggy for you. Let's try it. Oh, God, close enough. Once back in India, the son retrieves the plans from his father's body and follows their instructions to build the automated soldiers for King Ajatasattus to protect Buddha's relics in the underground chamber. Well hidden and expertly guarded, the relics and robots fell into obscurity. Instantly, I'm taken to Indiana Jones whenever he's trying to get back the cup from the ancient Templar Knight of King Arthur, and then he has to be a pendant man and duck, and these blades that come around that are supposed to be something that apparently from a treasure point set off and slice anybody that's coming through there, and you have to know what the hell you're doing, or you're not going to make it past that, or this, and a series of booby traps. Here's a look at the Maurya Empire. And so we see the Greco-Bactrians that are up here in this range here, and the Seleucid Empire that's touched onto it, and of course the open area that's here. We also know the whole northeast of this at one time was, well, we just won't talk about that. Going from here, oh look, Adam's Bridge connecting it to Madagascar, to Sri Lanka. So 2 centuries after Ajatasattu, Ashoka ruled the powerful Mauryan Empire in Pataliputa in 273 BC, and Ashoka constructed many stupas to enshrine Buddhist relics across the vast kingdom. According to the legend, Ashoka had heard the legend of the hidden relics and has searched until he discovered the underground chamber guarded by the fierce android warriors. Violent battles raged between Ashoka and the robots. In one version, the god Vikrama helped Ashoka defeat them by shooting arrows into the bolts that held the spinning constructions together. So in other words, locking them up in a way. In another tale, the old engineer's son explained how to disable and control the robots. At any rate, Ashoka ended up commanding the army of automatons himself. So here we go. There's a couple of them. There's this. Now next thing you know, there's a whole army of automatons that come out of this situation. But they say at any rate, whichever way it went. But again, I'm left with this idea that it's like, okay, you figured out how to disable them in this trick, but we're also talking about robots. Spinning, whirling, killing robots that seem to have some type of intelligence of being able to detect whether it's pressure points on the ground and so on. Now one would think, okay, you could have a hole in the ground like a well and a rock, and whenever a pressure point it releases and it starts to drop it, and if that rope's still viable, it can start doing the thing and spinning it and so on. But once it's done its little trick, it's stuck and it never does again. How do you get this thing to reload again? Well, you could do it off a water wheel and have it going and going back the other way, but now we're putting all kinds of technology into this. Well, make no mistake, we've already got all kinds of technology all into this. And supposedly he learned this from him, whether he got it from a tattoo or a scroll inside of his body or just somewhere inside of his leg, and his kid found it. It's a story they tell. Robot warriors, and these robots and people that are making robots like crazy in Greek-controlled Egypt. Exchange between the East and West. Is this legend simple or simply fantasy? Or could be the tale of coalesced around the earlier culture exchanges between the East and West? Well, yeah, it sounds more like that, of course. Yeah, but the story clearly connects the mechanical beings defending Buddha's relics to automatons of Roma Visaya, the Greek influenced West. How ancient is this tale? Most scholars assume it arose in the medieval Islamic and European times. That's funny because it's in one of the earliest times and it goes from dating of that tale and the pieces that are left to between 100 AD and like 250 BC. Says, but I think the story could be much older. The historical setting points to technological exchange between the Mauryan and Hellenistic cultures. Contact between India and Greece began in the 5th century BC, a time when Ajasaro's engineers created novel war machines. Greco-Buddhist culture exchange intensified after Alexander the Great's campaigns in northern India also. Yeah, that didn't work out exactly as the people said either, and what's currently taught is the way that it comes out. And then, of course, shortly after, Alexander on his way back, and he passes away, and the whole thing that went along with that. And I did a few videos about that last year. Here we can see some ancient Greek writing too, but much like a Rosetta Stone, it's also written in other inscription. Well, it's in Greek and Aramaic, and a monument originally erected by King Ashoka at the Kandahar of what today is Afghanistan. In 300 BC, two Greek ambassadors, Megasthenes and Diomachus, resided in Pataliputra, which has boasted Greek influence in art and architecture, which was the home of the legendary artisan who obtained plans for robots in Roma Visaya. Grand pillars erected by Ashoka are inscribed in ancient Greek. And name Hellenistic kings, demonstrating Ashoka's relationship to the West. Historians know that Ashoka corresponded with Hellenistic rulers, including Ptolemy II Philadelphus and Alexandria, whose spectacular procession in 279 BC famously displayed a complex animated statues and automated devices. One of which was where the Greek goddess comes up, and it's on a float, if you will, and at certain points it stops, and then she stands up on her own and takes a pitcher and a bowl and pours the bowl full of milk with the pitcher and sets it back down, and then sets back down, and then it goes riding along, never spilling a drop of milk. And then a little bit later she stands up and pours again, and one wonders what the hell went on. Well, with her arm being slung down at the last point of that, it allows the bowl to drain through the arm, through the body, down into the actual vase itself again, through her hand, through a tube, and go back down. So it would siphon itself back down into it, and she'd be able to show somebody else again and do it over and over and over again. And the moving of the cart was what wound up the whole thing in the first place, like a clock, just like whenever you spin it to line it up. Historians report that Ashoka sent envoys to Alexandria, and Ptolemy II sent ambassadors to Ashoka in Pataliputra. It was customary for diplomats to present splendid gifts to show off cultural achievements. Did they bring plans or miniature models of automatons and other mechanical devices? They pick them apart and then figure that out, something off of it? No, the tale isn't that. The tale's that he went there and had to sneak it back, and he didn't make it back. He got killed trying to bring this ancient knowledge back, like so many other tales. I cannot hope to pinpoint the original date of the legend, but it is possible that the idea of robots guarding Buddha's relics meld both with the real and imagined engineering feats from the time of Ajatasattu and Ashoka. This striking legend is proof that the concepts of building automatons were widespread in antiquity, and reveals the universal and timeless link between imagination and science. And so the idea of a robot, does it go back to just a few decades ago? No. Does it go back to Metropolis and Fritz Lang's movie and the robot girl that looks like C-3PO. No, no, it goes way, way back, way, way, way back before that, and trying to make automated humans. Aristotle once said in a dissertation he was talking about how he got off on slavery, and then all of a sudden he dropped it for a weird point here. He decided to describe how that what if we had just robots and they could do all the things that we tried to get slaves to do, even farming and so on, and looms that were automated, all of these things, we wouldn't even need slaves. And then he just drops the notion and goes back to his other dissertation. One wonders if he shouldn't have talked about that a little bit more, a little bit longer. So this article is about Adrienne Mayer, and I watched her dissertation where she had talked about this, and I guess it's her dissertation connected with her new book, Gods and Robots, Myths, Machines, and Ancient Dreams of Technology. That helped me compile this together, or actually the last one, and then, hey, ironically, this is her article here. So it can show you a bunch of old connections there, but again, I'm about to get into Ashoka and how this kingdom here and what that led about to a second fruition in India that we know about today. But that'll be in a separate video. So like, share, and subscribe if you haven't done so already, and check if it's doing it, because most of my people aren't getting all the notifications like they were supposed to. Peace.